MCP enables decomposing these agents and adding new capabilities, but one it really doesn't is managing the existing context. I think it would be a really interesting plugin point to be able to swap in and I think it's one of the big differentiators between how does Codex versus Claude versus any of the other ones, how do they manage your long history and choose what to include? Token usage, I think, is a more accurate measure of precision. It's like how much of the context window did the agent have to spend to find the piece of information it needed. Once you have this eval, it's like, okay, this is how I'm evaluating it. Then it's like, okay, now I can measure improvements. Let me go see what I can do. What's eating up context window here? And you can run examples. Product development is it's a series of learning. The most valuable thing you can do is learn. And so it's doing experiments, and however you can learn for whatever you're building, whether it's if you're building a piece of infrastructure that you need to battle test and scale, maybe you can learn by building a system. Probably what you need to do though is talk to users and go find people who are using it. The dream is always building something that you yourself use. That's one of the things that has helped me with Ref is I'm building a tool that I can use on a regular basis and understand when it's working or not.
Hey, welcome to the Scalekit podcast. I'm Ravi. I'm one of the co-founders of Scalekit. Scalekit is an art stack for AI applications. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Matt Dailey, founder of Ref.tools, where he's built one of the first commercially successful MCP servers with hundreds of paying customers. Matt brings a unique perspective from scaling AI systems at enterprise level. He was on Figma's AI applied research team during their major AI pivot, working on visual search capabilities, and previously held engineering roles at Palantir and Amazon. Matt, I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, so before we talk about Ref.tools, I want to understand how you moved into the whole AI research team at Figma. Can you give me a little bit of backstory?
Yeah, totally. So I joined Figma back in 2018. So I was there for quite a while. I joined on the infrastructure team, and then I worked on the growth team for a few years where I was a manager. When my first daughter was born, actually, I was on parental leave. It was 2022, just before ChatGPT came out. And I was on parental leave, and I kind of knew I wanted to go from a manager role to an IC role to have a little bit more flexibility in my schedule. And so I was picking up coding again. I hadn't coded in a couple of years. And I tried GitHub Copilot for the first time. And it just it blew my mind. I was like, I can't believe I haven't been coding with this for a few years. And my first thought was how can we bring this feeling of flow to designers at Figma? The sense of just feeling like you're moving just a little bit faster, not getting bogged down in things. And so I started tinkering around, playing with stuff, and then ChatGPT came out and everything blew up. And while I was on parental leave, I had no AI background. I wasn't equipped to go start this team, but I was talking to the VP in the org. I was we need to go do this. And he was okay, great. What I didn't know is they were in the process of acquiring company Impera to sort of seed that team.
Okay.
And the CEO of that company is Ankur, who founded Brain Trust, which is the eval platform.
Right.
So it's a really great team that was seeding Figma's AI effort. And so when I came back from parental leave, I sort of talked to Ankur and some of the folks on that team while I was on leave to see whether it would be a good fit to come back. And I joined that team. And we basically had the prompt of go, AI is happening, figure out something to do with it. And so that's sort of where it all started at.
So what were some of the first prototypes or experiments that you did to apply AI in the context of Figma?
Yeah, well, so the obvious one, and this was back at GPT 3.5 Turbo. It's you have to kind of remember what the model context is. But the various obvious one is prompt to design. Can I input a prompt and get a design file out? And so we were the first things we were prototyping was okay, it can generate HTML. Can we map that to designs? And we were getting some things, but it wasn't quite landing it wasn't quite there. The models, that was a different era of models. And I was really captivated by this autocomplete idea. How can we bring autocomplete? And so one of the things we prototyped first was there's this workflow that designers have where they're starting a new design and they want to go gather the relevant assets. And so they're gather some buttons, gather some design resources and copy and paste them into their design file. So I was okay, what if we can do a smart copy and paste? So while you're working, we go find the assets that are relevant to you and bring them in. So you're designing a design and we're oh, you probably want these buttons because these buttons are commonly used in these pages. And we did, in a few weeks, we sort of built a prototype of that. And we spent a long time how can we get this to work? It wasn't clicking with designers internally to be good, as good as we imagined. And at some point, we were honestly getting pretty frustrated. We were in like a low point of like, this could be something, but we just can't get it to work. And we decided to scale it back to like, that system was basically a RAG system where we're retrieving some files and then choosing stuff and then editing them and then adding them to the design file. And we're like, well, can we just make this search really good? Like, let's scale back. And like, then we kind of, as soon as you have that realization of like, let's just make the first part of it good, know that's working, and then build the feature on top of it, then you realize, oh, actually search itself is a really important feature. And we sort of leaned into prototyping that. Some of the vision language models were coming out at that point. And so we were exploring clip and some image embeddings as well, because I think design is a really interesting space because it's like you need both the visual and the text aspect. And yeah, it's kind of how we ended up on search.
So how did that journey where you're doing a lot of cool stuff, you just moved from manager to IC role, you're kind of helping reinvent Figma itself. So how did that move from Figma to starting Ref.tools came about?
Yeah, I think it was, so that job was a really cool role to have. I really enjoyed that a lot.
Exactly.
It was a lot, and being on the forefront, we're building our own models, exploring stuff. It's really, really cool stuff. But when I joined Figma was a pretty small company. It was like 30 people. But I was looking at other companies that were like 2 or 3 people. Like I wanted to do that early stage thing. The problem is I had like 4 jobs in the last year of like startups that had started and failed and not gone anywhere. And I just needed like a stable career like for a while. And so and Figma turned out to be that, and it was great. And it was an awesome experience. But I had that itch to go back and like start from zero for a long time. And I got to the point where I had been managing, and I was like, my wife and I were having kids. And so we now have 2 wonderful daughters. And that era of like we're having kids was very stable, and I got to do cool stuff. And now I'm ready to go take on a little bit more risk. The pivot was around my second daughter's parental leave. The first daughter, I sort of set myself up to be like, what if I only want to be a dad and I want to like take time off from tech entirely? Wow. I found myself but what I found happened as I got super depressed because I had like taken this part of myself that was really important and just set it aside to like focus on something new. And so with my second daughter's birth, I was like, I'm gonna write just a little bit of code every single day, and that was like 5 minutes, like a log line somewhere, or like a little to do or something, just to like have a project going on. Because I love building things, and I need to have that thread even while we're in the like midst of like raising kids, and like that's the main focus. I need to keep this part of myself healthy, and that little bit of code every day led to like I built a command line coding tool for myself that I was like, this is cool, but I didn't have anything differentiated that felt like meaningful to launch. And then MCP came out, and I was I don't think I had put in my I'm not coming back from parental leave.
Okay.
Like I hadn't told my boss I was quitting yet, because I wasn't sure. I was sort of like experimenting, but I got to the point where I was like, I just love this experimenting more than I'm free to sort of explore and do what I want. While I was on parental leave, I caught up with him. I was like, hey, like I'm loving what I'm doing. Like I love what we're doing, but I'm like really enjoying this like exploring by myself thing, and I've wanted to do this for a while. And he kind of knew that, and so it wasn't like a huge surprise, but it was, yeah. So MCP had come out. I had some friends, Tadas actually, as I mentioned, Tadas and Pulse MCP were running a hackathon, and I built Ref for that hackathon, and I ended up winning that hackathon with Ref, and that started getting the first few users. And like once you have your first few users coming in, and that gives you that feeling of like, oh, this could be a thing, and like let me explore it. And then I had kind of just been like pulling the threads from there.
It's fantastic. First of all, Matt, I mean, huge congratulations on the 2 kids, and I think both the kids played a pivotal role in transforming your career.
They totally did.
I'm sure when they grow up, this is something that they'll remember very, very fondly. And again, like I said, Tadas is a great guy. I mean, it's great conversations whenever I speak to him. You learn a lot. The one thing that I want to understand is, I know you spoke about this hackathon and MCP. I think you started in February, and MCP kind of came out in October, November last year. Mm-hmm. So I know it was getting a lot of adoption by then, but what drew you to the problem of building this Ref.tools as part of that hackathon? Did you have any pain point while you were building this, other projects that you're working on?
Yeah, so the other project I was working on was this command line coding tool, and something I saw it and Cursor and all the like tools failing at was like when there's just this there are all these little pieces of information that just exist somewhere. It's just a fact. And if you had that fact, the agent would be successful. But if it doesn't, it'll fail. And so I think that realization of like, it's like common knowledge now, but like the context is so important. Having everything that matters in the context is the difference between a successful output of your agent or not. And I kind of realized I worked at search at Palantir, I worked on search at Figma. Like this is an area I actually have expertise and I have something to say. And that got me excited particularly because like when you find a real problem that you have expertise to solve and like can go work on, I think, yeah, so I got really excited about Ref. Like agents should just never make mistakes about libraries, public libraries, private libraries, and your internal docs. They should just never make those mistakes. And I got really excited about that, and then doing it in a way that didn't blow up the context window because tokens are expensive, and it's like, and because of context rot, as you like shove more stuff into the context window, your output just gets worse. I think Chroma came out with an interesting paper about that recently, and sort of measuring it. But I think it's something most engineers you can kind of feel after you've been talking to Claude Code for long enough. You're like, it's never going to get there. You hit the point of no return and you have to like start a new thread and try again.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you'll have to add some sort of a summarizer agent in the middle, get the summary of whatever you have done so far.
MCP enables decomposing these agents and adding new capabilities, but one it really doesn't is managing the existing context. I think it would be a really interesting plugin point to be able to swap in like, and I think it's one of the big differentiators between how does Codex versus Claude versus any of the other ones, how do they manage your long history and choose what to include?
Exactly.
It's hard to think of what are the actual other differentiators they have, because like they all kind of have the same really good models, and they all kind of have the same loop, and they kind of have the same tools, and it's really just like managing your conversation and letting that grow is the.
And then how do they smartly take over from the previous task to the next task without blowing up their own context window? I think that's where the huge differentiation is. Matt, I'm curious about, I know you spoke about giving right context to cursors or cloud codes or windsurfs, whoever they are, so that they can generate effective output. So I'm just wondering, why don't I just give the links to developer documentation? Let's say if I'm integrating Stripe, I'll just give docs.stripe.com or api.stripe.com or whatever. And then I let these AIDs figure out what information to fetch. How is Ref.tools adding additional value instead of just me giving the developer documentation link?
Yeah, that was actually one of the things that led to Ref was around this problem I faced with Exa and Firecrawl and some of these other tools that do that scraping, where they just would drop out the code tags, or they'd only read the like curl and not the JavaScript, doing an amazing job building search over the entire web for agents, but like not quite tuned for the pages that I read that I want my agent to read. And so the first thing I was building was actually a web scraper, and one of the things that I think differentiates Ref from other things, I built this web crawler that will read code tabs and reads documentation sites, and like I spent a lot of time bug bashing all the different like ways that people set up their doc sites to make sure it catches all the edge cases and doesn't leave stuff on the table.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. It's a very interesting point where most of these documentation sites have code blocks in different tabs, either based on your tech stack or based on your framework, whatever it could be. And unless your crawler is managed to specifically go through all of them and then extract the right context, they're usually lost out in the extraction process. It's a very interesting insight. Matt, one more fundamental thing. You spoke about solving search at Palantir and Figma. How different was it to solve search for agentic interfaces rather than solving search for humans? Like, did you see any differences? Were more or less the same?
Yeah, totally. I think they're definitely very similar, but also a little bit different. And I think there's like value to lead into there. I mean, the way humans search is we like go to Google, we enter a query, we get 10 blue links, and we're like kind of look at that overview and decide which one to click. We zoom in. If we click one, maybe we found it great. Otherwise, we back out, click another, or we refine the query. And agents basically do the same thing, where they'll like make a query and kind of look at the results and explore, do I need to make another query? And I think that's intentional. The labs are training them to behave like humans. You can actually see this with OpenAI's deep research spec. If you want an MCP server to plug in, it needs to meet this like search and fetch are the two tools you need to provide, which Ref does, which is like intentional to like, they're training the models to work this way, so we should build tools that map to how the models work. The thing that's different though is like the memory, where for a human, I do one Google search, I see a page of links, and then I refine my query, I get a new page of links. I can't go back and easily click a prior link. Whereas for agents, that memory is just all still in the context. Like it's like having all your Google tabs open next to each other and being able to just like go click whichever one you want. And I think that opens this sort of possibility for one of the things that Ref does, which is never return the same link twice to the same session, because it would just be wasting context.
So you spoke about context window a lot and how Ref.tools is actually helping optimize for the smaller context window that these models have, or don't blow them out of proportion. Mm-hmm. So what sort of architecture or what sort of things that you had to keep in mind while building Ref.tools, which actually differentiates the better output against other players that are out there?
Part of that is like, how do you choose to evaluate the system? And I think the classic search system you evaluate with precision and recall, which are like, precision is like, of things we returned, how many of them were relevant, and recall is like, did we find all the things that are relevant? And that's like the sort of classic, like one search, one measurement result. So I had initially done evals in this, like every search, I want to make sure, am I getting good precision and recall for my searches? And then I kind of realized like that wasn't actually mapping to agents' behavior. And I wanted to have an eval that matches like what are agents doing and eval that whole loop. And so that's where I got from using recall and precision to using recall and token usage as the like, where token usage I think is a more accurate measure of precision. Is like how much of the context window did the agent have to spend to find the piece of information it needed. Once you have this like eval, it's like, okay, this is how I'm evaluating it. Then it's like, okay, now I can measure improvements. Let me go see what I can do. Like what's eating up context window here, and you can run examples. And so the first version of Ref didn't do a lot of this stuff. It was a more naive rag where it's just like, search, here's some results, it's in your context, you'll figure it out. What I realized is the foundation models are really good at picking the right, like given an overview, picking the right thing to read, because I think they've been trained on that task.
Exactly.
And when I launched Ref, it had a search and a read tool, but the read was more like with the intention of it existed because I had built this scraper that I thought was good. I wanted to expose it. And also because documentation often includes links. And so I wanted the agent to be able to follow links that it found when it read. And I was like, oh, this matches what they do. But what if I don't return the entire content with my search results? Like this sort of naive rag is like, here's all the context, you figure it out. What if I just return the overviews? So that was like the very first step. Probably the biggest win, because you're not just dumping stuff into the context window. And then the optimizations on top of that are starting to like maintain state. So if the agent has this state in its head of the thread, I should maintain that state. Like how can I leverage that? That's where I started using MCP sessions. I'm actually going to be speaking on that at the upcoming Dev Summit. So look forward to that talk. And the last one was really good. I recommend anyone go check out the talks from the SF Dev Summit. It was really great.
So Matt, I'll go back to the same question, which is you spoke about optimizing the right context to give to the agents, and then you spoke about how just giving the URLs and letting the agent follow through, and then it's not good enough. But now most of the documentation builders are giving LLMs full.txt or LLMs.txt. Isn't that solving some of the problems?
What I view, like Mintlify is great. They publish LLMs.txt for you, and it's great because Ref can go crawl that and chunk it into the appropriate sizes and make it easy to search. What you still want though, like those chunks are still larger than what you want. You want to put all those chunks in. You want to put like, here's a 1-sentence description of what this is. Let me then go pull in and that's like 20 tokens. You can choose whether you want to pull in the like 1,000 tokens if it's relevant. It's a great step, and I think it really fits well with Ref because we'll crawl LLMs.txt, index it, and LLMs.txt is like the publishing side, and then Ref is kind of the subscribe side of that.
I think what you're saying makes sense to me, which is, hey, why do you want to give the entire LLMs full.txt to the model and then letting them figure out where to do? How about giving a smaller chunk of it and then let it follow the right portion so that it can get the right context rather than just blowing it up with entire information that the website may have. Did I catch that right?
Yeah, that you phrased it better than I did. I think it's like why should it be spending its reasoning on figuring out what is relevant from this big document instead of another system can do that and then just give it the relevant thing to do what it needs to do.
Yeah, at least in my mind, it totally makes sense. So Matt, when you started in February, most of the MCP servers are STDIO, I think you can argue that even today, most of the MCP servers are STDIO-based MCP servers. Of course, the more and more streamable and SSE are coming up. So when you started Ref.tools, why did you choose MCP as a way to getting things done? Is it because it's the easiest way to give context to the models, or what drew you to the MCP? What sort of challenges did you think about STDIO versus HTTP? What was your transition? I know I asked a lot of questions in one single statement.
Yeah, I know, but I see what you're getting at there. Yeah, so it started as a STDIO server because that's what there was at that point. I had built the search index. Like the really valuable thing that Ref has is the crawler and the search index, and I had been like, oh, maybe I can launch an API. I thought, maybe there's dreaming big, maybe Cursor integrates this and this is the API they use directly. What I think MCP does, why I'm so excited about it, is it lets us decompose these larger agentic systems into pieces where one person can dedicate themselves to solving that problem as well as possible, or one team. For me, I'm I want to build this documentation search part of it and build the absolute best version that you can plug into any coding agent. And I think as engineers, that's just innately, we love decomposing things and putting the Lego blocks together to build our stack or build the best version for us. And I think that's what's so exciting about MCP overall.
A very curious, I would say, hot take. So people say MCP is just a glorified API wrapper. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think those folks probably haven't been paying enough attention. I feel because it's one, it's being able to expose an API to agents more cleanly, which is itself a valuable thing. Even if you're just wrapping APIs, being able to be my agent can now use this API is a useful thing. I think the core of that criticism though is building an MCP server itself is not creating much value. It's a few lines of TypeScript or Python that's connecting things. The protocol is valuable because it enables these connections, but the value is coming from the thing you're connecting to. It's you're connecting to GitHub, you're connecting to Notion. The value is in there, and I think that's why there are not so many. Why Ref is one of the only sort of standalone MCP businesses, because you need to build a valuable thing and then use MCP to deploy it, not necessarily just building a wrapper around something else. I agree, it's not. It's nice. It's definitely nice. It's not a valuable thing, if that makes sense.
Matt, because you spoke about it, why is Ref.tools the only commercial MCP server out there? Why aren't there more startups taking MCP only approach instead of building these dashboards, instead of doing all the traditional stuff that everyone has been doing for quite some time now?
I think a lot of the MCP effort so far has been focused on connecting to these existing sources of value. So I mentioned Notion is building their Notion server to make that as good as possible. And building, and if all of these big enterprises are building their own MCP server to connect to agents, I don't know, it feels obvious I will build tools for these enterprises to build their things. It's a pretty clear pitch to VCs, also business to make, I guess. And there's a bunch of folks figuring that out. I think when you're I'm gonna go build a business to do something, you have to solve a human problem and deploy or wrap an API is not a human problem that you have. It's you have a problem that is I want to use Travelocity to find a site, find a trip, and do all these things, and it's still the value is from somewhere else. And so I think I built a search index that is valuable, and then MCP is what has made that possible. I think as we see more, coding agents are the main way, the by far the most popular agent type. As we see more types of agents, support is probably a big one, but I can imagine decomposing those. Once we're oh, my support agent might need these capabilities, what can I plug into my support agent, and how can I give that agent a specific capability really well? I think we'll see more MCP servers that are solving a specific capability for a class of agents. I think they're lower hanging fruit. I think we haven't gotten to that part of the tree yet.
Yeah, and while you're saying that, you kind of reminded me of the same story where a couple of decades back, when web was just starting up, people were still trying to understand how to build business, building web applications or building websites. They didn't really know what to do with it or how to do with it. I think what you're saying is the same thing. Yeah, we're still in the extremely early stages of, building MCP servers as a business distribution and then monetizing them. So you just see this as an obvious thing to happen, maybe a few months down the line or a few years down the line, rather than just being an add-on to an existing application or add-on to an existing API server. That totally makes sense.
I was listening to Lenny's podcast. I forget who the guest was. I wish I could shout that person out. But they were saying that like this AI, there's going to be a new distribution channel. I worked on growth, so like this kind of idea of like how are we going to distribute is like a thing. It's exciting to me. I do think this like MCP decomposing and like having this way that you connect to agents is like, we haven't really figured out how to optimize this channel, do it yet, but there's this like ability to like get things to people in a new way that if you can do it well, you can build your business there. The hard part is you're like pioneering through the wilderness of like, how do I actually do this? How do I actually reach people? It's an interesting era for growth as well as AI.
So on that particular problem, how did you distribute or bring awareness about Ref.tools to the wider developer community? What sort of distribution channels did you consider for, helping make your product reach to a wider audience?
The first ones were hackathons. Because it's all for developers, and I was fortunate enough to go back to back winning 2 hackathons in a row, and that was enough to like sort of seed a few signups a day from just like the social posts. I think those are the secret of hackathons is there's actually just a marketing event for different companies that are sponsoring them, and so you do co-marketing, and when you win, you can co-market with those companies, and so it's also picking the right scale of hackathons, because I went to a third hackathon and I was like, I'm 2 for 2, I'll easily win this one, and I like didn't even get to be a finalist, and I was like, oh, this is like not a scalable approach. I had a random spike of signups one day, and I was like, what's happening here? And it turns out there is somebody on Reddit who had like, someone else was like, oh, contact 7 is great, and it is great. It's great, but then one of my users was there, and he's like, well, actually, Ref does this, and it like improves in these ways, and they like argued with each other and got a bunch of upvotes, and that like drove people. And so then I started participating on Reddit. I think Reddit's really interesting because it's a really good community for policing and like shilling. Like I can't just show up and be like, hey, like, buy my thing. Yeah. And so, but what I do have is I'm an experienced engineer. I'm in the MCP world. I have knowledge and like experience that is valuable to people. And so I started just trying to participate. And I set up some automations. There's a tool called F5 bot that will like alert you to threads on Reddit and different subreddits that are using terms that you care about. And so I set up some for people who are looking for coding documentation and stuff. And I could go chime in and like an MCP and sort of participate. That started like driving the wave of like a little bit more. So that was one. And it turns out I've later realized this. I ended up talking to that guy, like back to Tadas. Tadas had mentioned Ref on Reddit a while back. Someone had asked this question, how do I get documentation to my agent? He's like, Ref is building this exact thing. And on Google, that's like a recommended answer at this point. And this guy, Stingray Charles, the Reddit user, was like asking Claude, like, hey, I'm using Context 7, but I want it to be better in these ways. And so Claude went out, searched, found Ref, told him about it, and like got it set up for him, which I thought was like super cool. But it's like an example of like answer engine optimization, or other acronym, generative engine optimization, where you're like getting the agent to mention your product is like a whole new area of growth. And Reddit is actually a highly trusted site by these agents. So that was a start. I think to shout out some other things like Pulse MCP, and Smithery is another one where there's these aggregators of servers, so getting listed on those places. One that I'm still working on that I want to crack is like all the clients have their own sort of trusted MCP servers. So like Cursor has a page that's like, here are good MCP servers, and Ref isn't on there, and I really wanted to get it on there because one, I think it is a high quality server and it would serve their users, and two, I think it would be a great sort of discovery mechanism. GitHub has one, client has one. Those are the three that are like huge that I would love to just be on the list for. So if any of those folks are listening, that's a goal for me.
We'll make sure we'll get it to them.
Thanks.
But great insights, Matt. One is, of course, when you're just starting out, I think hackathons also act as a great way to check the pulse of, hey, does this problem even resonate with the kind of audience that I'm looking for? Again, Reddit and the combination of generative engine optimization and Reddit, I think it's a great source for people building developer tools, because your audience is anyway on Reddit trying to find answers, and people are trusting the answers given by Claude and ChatGPT, etc., to get things done. So the combination of these two, and then trying to be present in all the marketplaces, especially if you're building an MCP server in these MCP marketplaces, it's a great way to build visibility around your product. Of course, the biggest thing is your product itself should be good. So your users actually vouch for it, and you don't have to market yourself. So
that's the biggest thing was having Stingray Charles advocating for me was like, like this, when you hear someone else, and it's valuable because you hear someone else say why this is valuable to me, and you can take their explanation and like, okay, now I'll explain it to my users because they don't care about the details of my crawler or the search engine. That's exciting to me, but like they care about did it solve a problem and how do they talk about their problem, and that's gold. That's absolute gold.
Yeah, great point. How do you speak to the users in the language that they actually think about the problem and think about the solution, not about how you built it? I think that's a great insight. So Matt, one quick question. You spoke about, hey, all this distribution and product positioning and developer outreach, these different channels is great. But like you said, the most important part is your MCP server has to be good in the first place. So what was your journey like from day one of building the Ref.tools MCP server into actually making it stable, scalable, and effective for a period of time? What operational challenges or what operational techniques did you actually leverage to make it better over a period of time?
So when it started, it was a standard IO server and like Firebase is the back end. And so I've been building on Firebase for like 10 years. I love it. And it's just like my go-to. There's all these new things now, but like that's just my go-to thing. And I think that I mentioned that because it's something that's like simple. I know how it works, and it will like and predictable for me. And as like I'm the operator, so I'm going to build a system that I can operate well. The Google Cloud ecosystem is something I'm familiar with, and that I think that's a key part of it. And then there's just the sort of classic DevOps things of like having a staging environment, having a production environment, keeping them clean and separated. It's all the like the software engineering stuff and infrastructure stuff we know how to do from everything else. I would say the MCP part does add a wrinkle because it's like a new protocol and like all the clients are a little bit different, and you kind of need to understand how it's going to work with all of those. And frankly, that's kept me from really pushing on all the envelope of what MCP can do, because not all the clients implement it the same way. And it adds this testing surface where I have to go not just like the premium like Cursor, Windsurf, whatever tools, but then the long tail of tools that everyone uses. I want to support all of those. And I want to make sure the experience is good. And so that focusing on making tool use work really well was the first part of just making sure tools behave effectively. I had started with the goal of like make sure that search was really fast. It was really fast to start, but it was using too many tokens. And so I kind of pivoted towards precision and like figured we can optimize speed later, but make it like really precise. I think that was a big leap in terms of search quality. But in terms of like operating an MCP server, a big challenge is like using a stdio server. You're like shipping code to a client's machine, which will get updated whenever they choose to, which is like always a tough thing when you're used to running a web service.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole like client server versioning, like managing that thing, which I really direct everyone to use the streamable HTTP endpoint now, because like it's way easier.
100%. Whenever they say I'm building an MCP server, I'm like, don't even think about STDIO. It's not even worth it. Go streamable HTTP from day one. You are in control. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
The one cost of that for Ref was the hackathon version would actually ingest your code base and figure out what your libraries are and build a like sort of search filter based on like the versions of library that you used. So there's a bunch of stuff in Ref's crawler that will like detect different versions and like version the docs. What I found in practice is just like building a good search. Like the retrieval part can solve that better than than ingesting it. And so there's this cost where like I think there's an opportunity of when you get to run code on someone's machine, you can do additional stuff, like in Ref's case, ingesting your repo directly. But like the trade-off isn't there it doesn't improve search quality enough to like force people to do this and then have to deal with the operational burden as well.
Again, I just want a couple of follow-up questions on improving the quality of the MCP servers itself. How did you improve? Did you use any evals as you go through it? How did you set up your evals? How did you realize that the tool metadata, the tool description that you're writing is effective so that models are giving you the right context? Because the developer could be writing whatever they want to write, but the model actually has to supply the right context to you so that your search can be effective as well. So how did you tweak all these different things while you're building your MCP server?
So this goes back to like the classic search eval, which is like one query, precision and recall, and you're sort of like giving a query and you know what the results you expect to be, versus like an agentic eval where you're giving an agent a task and like sort of asking it to find the right resources. I think that was a big upgrade. So I had this eval that was, a list of queries and the expected URLs to find, and I converted that into I have like an eval harness locally that will run an agent that is like, its goal is go find relevant documentation for this query, and then that actually has the agent will write the queries to it basically just runs with Ref's MCP server installed.
Do you do some sort of similarity metric to evaluate if it is doing the right job based on whatever you're thinking it should do and things like that?
No, so this is one of the things actually I learned at Figma in terms of eval. You can build like really big, like massive eval sets and spend a lot of time on that, but it's not really worth it. If you can just get like 20 queries, you're probably going to get all the edge cases and you're going to move way faster. And like the human eval, like going to look at, as a human, what's coming out here and what feels wrong, that's where you find the bugs and fix them. And so, you have this risk with a small eval set that you like over optimize to that. So you need to like recycle it. And fortunately I have enough queries coming in that any given day I could go grab like, here are 20 queries for popular libraries, build a new set. As a human, the first pass I'll evaluate like, what are the quality of these links? Maybe sometimes I'll go like try and answer the question myself with Google and like be like, I don't think this is right. I think there's a better answer. And so just spending the human time to craft a small but like useful eval set, that's just way faster and more effective for me.
It sounds so counterintuitive, but after you explain it, of course, it makes sense. But when someone reads about evals, you're like, oh, set up all these metrics and then run these evals along, consistently with, 100,000 data set and things like that.
It's a problem for a different scale. Like if you're Facebook and you have like, you can change something and get a billion interactions in a day, like great, do statistical experiments. But if you're launching something, you just need to know how well does this like non-deterministic thing work. Build a harness so you can do a bunch of tests and evaluate them quickly. I'll shout out BrainTrust as like the tool I use for that. As like it's quite easy to set up a little eval that you get a table of data and you can kind of like, and they have a human eval thing where you can like go through each one and write little notes and stuff. And so shout out.
Yeah, I think they built a great platform that's almost essential if you want to improve the quality of the agents or if you want to improve the quality of their MCP servers, etc. So moving on, Matt, like you built or you proved that you can actually build commercial business building an MCP server that solves a real problem. If there are indie developers out there, what do you advise them to do on how do they identify pain points? How can they build their own MCP server? How can they monetize their own MCP server? What are the steps that you would advise them to take?
Yeah, I think going back to for what I think MCP is for, if you're like, I want to build an MCP server and make it a business, it's like, it's for decomposing agents and doing part of that really. So build a part of an agent that works really, really well and is valuable to the extent that it like actually helps people. Where with Ref, I can say like, if you're grabbing 10,000 tokens with some other server, you can save 50, 60% of that and you're saving 5 to 6 cents per request. Like there's a dollar cents, like this is valuable to you for this reason. So you get this like pitch of like, how does this trace back to dollars and cents of what I care about? This is more general product development. My belief is like we're in the era where like anyone can build a crappy version of something, of anything. Like anyone can build a crappy anything. And so being able to build something that is good at something, like that's what you need to be able to do. And so for me, I have plenty of experience as an engineer. So there are things that I know how to do better than other things. I think if I was like 22 and had no experience and like on anything yet, and I was like, I just am excited about this idea and I want to go deep on it, like that would be what I'd follow. For me, I have a career working in search and working in growth, and I have like these skills. And so there's an area where there's less resistance for me to like go push into, and I know I can build a good thing in this domain. Yeah, I think this in the era of AI code, it's like quality and taste are the differentiators. Where if you spent the time to work through the edge cases and make it good and be really thoughtful about it, that has value to people because you're gonna like. And the problem though is a lot of people are gonna be fine with a crappy version. So like if you're like, I'm okay with a naive version of this product and it works for me, like great, that's cool. Then you are trying to be the like premium version of something it's kind of always a good place to be when you're marketing a product too. It's like we're the good version. Yeah.
What I took away is you had a really beautiful undercurrent, which is, hey, first understand your strengths. In your case, search is your strength. Growth marketing is your strength. And optimize your strengths and then solve a problem that can actually really add value, and then think about making it so beautiful and so perfect and so valuable that, of course, everyone will adopt and use it. I think the undercurrent of optimizing your own strengths and discovering your own strengths, I think that's very well put. That's the takeaway that I got, at least.
Yeah. I think that's key if you're going to be an indie developer and sort of build on your own, because you're doing it yourself. Your skill set is what matters, and the skill set you want to develop too. Like, if you want to learn a specific skill and you want to spend all your time on that, that's another opportunity of I just want to go as deep as possible on this problem and become an expert in it.
And you also spoke about, of course, anyone can build a crappy version of anything. If you have one advice that you want to give to developers who are taking something from mediocre to something really high quality, especially in the context of MCP servers, what is the area that you think they should spend on, especially in the context of MCP?
I think product development it's a series of learning. The most valuable thing you can do is learn. And so it's doing experiments, and however you can learn for whatever you're building, whether it's if you're building a piece of infrastructure that you need to battle test and scale, maybe you can learn by building a system. Probably what you need to do though is talk to users and go find people who are using it. The dream is always building something that you yourself use. That's one of the things that has helped me with Ref, is I'm building a tool that I can use on a regular basis and understand when it's working or not. So talk to users and get out there, see what they say, see what's working and not. It's so easy to just sit and build because it's so fun. We're all mostly engineers because we love building stuff, and you gotta talk to people too.
And the one thing that you spoke about, right, is iterations. Constantly listen to how your customers are using it, why are they using it, and what is the value they're deriving, and then use that to iterate and make your product better. Again, that's beautifully done. Matt, one last question. People say, again, I'm not saying this, people say MCP is modern blockchain and modern crypto, it's vaporware. It's just all hype. There are not real use cases because, of course, they haven't also seen a lot of commercially successful MCP servers come out, and they haven't seen good MCP servers come out. So what is your reaction to that? When people say that, do you cringe and then say no? You don't want to shout no?
Yeah, the differences between, there's a couple parts of that I react to. I think crypto versus MCP, there's no direct financial gain by MCP. I'm not trying, if people sign up for my crypto, I will directly make money. So there's an obvious difference there in the incentive to hype it up. I think this is a broader issue, but in the world, the attention economy we're in now, you need to break through. You need to somehow have people try your thing. Everyone is vying for your attention. We're all on our screens all day long, and you somehow need to have someone spend some time with your product. And so and you see this with products like Cluely, where they're it's like a hype machine. It's the whole thing. And it's just the era we're in now as a world where we're constantly connected. So you need to hype things to build a business. And I think so I think there's an innate human suspicion of hyping something up. You're trying to sell me something, obviously that's good for you, but why is it good for me? And I guess I'm sympathetic to that, that feeling of everyone trying to hype everything all the time. I'm sympathetic to that feeling, but I think the financial incentives are different with MCP, and I think it's a little bit more, there's a shared nerdiness of blockchain and MCP are both people who want to get into this weird nerdy stuff, but the people who are into blockchain and the people who are into crypto, they're kind of a different, highly overlapping but different groups of this is a cool algorithm for consensus, and versus I can make so much money.
How do I make quick money?
So, and I think there's a lot of the same people of oh, there's this new technology, I'm really excited about playing with it and seeing what it can do, and there's gonna be a lot of things that just people have imagined something that's not gonna be real. There's gonna be a lot of people hyping things that don't work out because there's a new technology people are trying and experimenting with. So I think that would be my answer, is let it settle and see, in a few years, if there are MCP servers people are using regularly, we'll know. I think people's life savings are probably not going to be stolen by MCP developers, so there's a lot less risk to the hype. So that would be my reaction to those folks.
As long as that MCP server is not deleting your database.
Yeah, true. As long as you have correctly created boundaries between your MCP server,
Yeah. On that note, thank you so much, Matt. It's been really, really great talking to you. You really are an inspiration. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and expertise on this session.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ravi. This was so fun.